I did a lot of videos on 3M stock and you guys actually really enjoy them. This is the feedback that I get. I did around 2 or 3 videos on the company and now the stock is still an absolute disaster. I mean, the stock is sitting at $97 per share. It has peaked at $280 and now it's sitting at $97.04. I mean, it's been a disaster, but I'm personally starting to see some improvements with 3M. I see a lot of things improving. I see their margins improving, a lot of good news around the lawsuits that they had, which was the main reason why the stock was going down. They were facing over 40 or $50 billion worth of lawsuits. There's a lot of good news around it. So in this video, I'm going to take a look at all the good news and give you an update on 3M. We're going to analyze the dividend safety because it's over 6%. A lot of you are dividend investors. Maybe you like 3M. So I'm going to take a look at the dividend, see if there's a potential dividend cut or not. I'm going to take a look at the upside potential of 3M. I'm going to tell you exactly when I'm looking to buy it because I'm extremely interested in 3M. As you guys know, I like stocks on bad sentiment. 3M's sentiment could not be worse, in my opinion, and I see some improvements. So I'm going to talk about them here in today's video. I'm going to keep it also very, very short. Now, taking a look at their margins have started to improve. The gross margins have improved, but also the net income margins. Net income margins have pretty much bottomed at 7% in 2022. They went to 9% in March 2023, and recently they have gone up to 12%. They are going back to where they were before 2022. This is pretty good news. There's a lot of improvements with 3M. The inventories are still the same, but a lot of their margins, a lot of the execution from the management is finally starting to play out. It's very encouraging. The recent earnings report was actually not bad at all, but my favorite part of it was actually the guidance. They have raised their EPS guidance by about 10 cents, between $8.60, $9.10 versus $8.50 to $9, over a 10 cents raise, which, I mean, something 3M actually needs. But there's nothing that can pretty much rally the stock. There's a lot of good news around, the earnings report. The stock went up a little bit, then it came back down. Then you had the earplugs lawsuit, which was massive. It was one of the reasons why 3M was coming down so much. They were facing anywhere between $8 billion to $25 billion. This is a lot of money for something like 3M. The entire company wasn't that high whenever they faced this, over 25 billion. But there's a lot of good news around this because so far, based on what I was reading, it's only going to be 6 billion paid over the next 5 years, which is 1.2 billion every single year. Now, this is much better than $25 billion. There's no way 3M would have made it at 25 billion. And again, whenever the news came out, 3M actually rallied on this news. The stock went up, everyone was excited, and then the stock came back down. There's pretty much, this is like PayPal. Like, there's nothing that can rally PayPal, and there's nothing that can rally 3M. There's nothing that can rally Disney. But this is normally what happens with a lot of those stocks. They eventually price in enough bad news. They find some kind of a floor, and this is when they recover on some kind of good news, some kind of analyst upgrade or something, and then the good sentiment starts kicking in, kind of like Nvidia, and then the stocks getting upgraded. But this is what happens with Wall Street. Whenever the stock is going down, even though maybe the business is fine, it keeps getting downgraded because analysts, they don't want to look wrong. And Warren Buffett talked about this, but this is what happens with a lot of the analysts. Now, the second lawsuit they were facing, and I believe they are still facing some lawsuits that have not been settled yet. I believe from Germany, Austria, and some places in Europe, from Rome, some places in Europe, but I don't really remember. But I believe there's still some lawsuits to be settled. But the biggest one was the PFAS lawsuit around the water pollution settlement, and it came out at $10.3 billion over the next 12 years. I'm going to take a look at both of those, how they come up every single year in terms of the dividend and everything. But a lot of you actually like 3M because of the dividend. The dividend is over 6%. This is pretty amazing, one of the highest since pretty much the data that I have from 2009. This is one of the highest at 6% dividend, very, very high. A lot of people claim that this is some kind of a value trap and it's not sustainable, but I see a lot of smart dividend investors that are actually buying 3M because they believe the dividend is actually covered. Now, I have a different opinion in this video, and I'm just looking at math. I'm not looking at my own bias or anything, and I'm just taking a look at the debt profile and the debt debt payments for 3M. This is the debt payments outside of any of the lawsuits pretty much. They have around 1.1 billion due in 2024. They have 1.8 due in 2025, and they have around 1.4 billion due in 2026. This is a lot of debt. But I also added in the debt payment pretty much from the lawsuits. The $1.2 billion actually represents the $6 billion settlement for the earplugs over the next 5 years, which is $1.2 billion every single year. And the second one, the $800 million a year, actually represents the PFAS settlement of $10.3 billion over the next 12 years, I believe, either 12 or 13, but I believe it was 12, and it came out with me something around $800 million a year. And if you add those numbers, 3M has to pay $3.1 billion pretty much in debt and obligations in 2024, $3.8 billion in 2025, $3.4 billion in 2026, and it continues on and on and on, but I just stopped it here over the next 3 years to assess the safety of the dividend. Now, this might actually seem like a lot, over 3.1 or 3.5 billion every single year, but 3M has an amazing free cash flow profile, amazing free cash flow conversion between 90 to 100%. This is a free cash flow generating machine. I mean, it's a legacy dividend. A lot of the dividend investors, they loved 3M. But all before the lawsuit, then after the lawsuits happened, no one wanted 3M anymore. And they were actually right, because it was just a lot of trouble happening. But things are starting to clear up. But 3M does have a pretty good free cash flow profile. It has troughed around 3.8 in 2022. Now it's improving. It's expected to be 4.2 in 2023 and around 4.5 in 2024. But I'm going to take the highest estimate, which is 4.5 in 2024, and we're going to assume that 3M even gets there. So if they have 4.5 billion of free cash flow, they can actually cover pretty much the obligations and the debt payments. So let's assume on average the debt payment was around, let's say, 3.5 billion, and they have 4.5 billion of free cash flow. This is pretty amazing. They're going to have $1 billion left every single year of the free cash flow to pay the dividend or do buybacks. But there's only one problem with that the dividend, the 6% dividend, actually comes up around $3.3 billion every single year. So if they only have $1 billion of free cash flow left and they have a dividend obligation of 3.3 billion, that would tell me that the dividend cannot be sustained. The company has 4 billion of cash, so they might be able to, wiggle some things around over the short term, pay a little bit here, a little bit there. Maybe they do something, raise some money. Maybe they refinance it to a later date, but this way they're gonna have to, incur a higher interest expense. It's gonna mess up the free cash flow profile. It would not be smart at all. But for me personally, looking at the numbers and looking at how much the dividend actually is, I personally believe the dividend cut is imminent with 3M. This is just my opinion. I don't want to upset anyone, but this is what I'm saying with the numbers. It's not adding up. I mean, unless they spin off something crazy and they raise like 20 or 30 billion or something crazy happen, or interest rate go to zero next year and they refinance. I'm personally not seeing how 3M can maintain the dividend. And this is just my honest opinion, which is why even though 3M is cheap, even though 3M is trading at 10.5 times earnings, there's still a lot of dividend investors and dividend funds that are holding 3M for the dividend. Now, these investors, they're not going to stick around whenever there's a dividend cut. A lot of them are going to sell and move on. It happened with Paramount. It happened with a lot of different companies that ended up cutting the dividend by 40, 50%, or even 80%. I personally believe 3M should cut the dividend by 50%. It would be very, very smart to use the free cash flow and pay back the debt to restructure the company and set it up for long-term growth, for long-term potential for something like 3M. So I personally believe that 3M looks like a decent opportunity at such prices. But I'm seeing a high chance of a dividend cut, which is why I'm not touching 3M here, even though it's amazing. I would personally wait for some kind of a dividend cut. I believe it's coming. I just don't know when. I mean, I could be wrong, of course, unless they raise some money, some kind of way. But I'm seeing much better opportunities in the market now. The stock market is coming down. I'm starting to see amazing risk-adjusted opportunities, much better than 3M. So I have 3M on my watch list. If we do ever have a dividend cut, maybe 50 to 70%, I mean, that would be extremely interesting for me to potentially buy 3M. It would show me that the management is prioritizing debt and growing the company instead of just a dividend. So that would be amazing. I'm personally waiting for dividend cut if I do get it. I mean, I would be extremely interested in actually owning 3M. So this was my honest opinion on the company. Maybe I upset some of you, but I'm just saying the truth. It was not financial advice, of course. Thank you very much for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please press the like button and maybe consider subscribing. So I hope to see you in another video.